being an entrepreneur sounds cool, but the reality of building a business is very, very difficult. Every level that you hit, there's a lot of things that suck that you just won't want to do. What you're capable of is on the other side. I don't feel like it.
And if you're committed to what it is that you're trying to do, nothing is going to stop you from getting there.
Welcome back to another episode of Real Business Owners with myself, Trevor Cowley. This week we have a unique and special guest. We have an individual that's been behind the scenes, behind the camera for the last 3 years. Nick Seibold has been with us doing an incredible job producing content, producing the podcast, the reels, the quotes that you guys see on social media. And I've seen him level up a lot over the last 3 years, and I've been very hard on him in some cases. And I wanted to pull back the curtain on some of the conversations that we've had so that you could see some of the growth that he's experienced in terms of working for me here at RBO, and some of the things that you may be able to do with individuals inside of your organization. Nick gives great advice so that you could see things from the employee point of view as well as the business owner point of view, so that we can kind of merge those two worlds and obviously live in a little bit more harmony. Per usual, if you're ready to level up, go to realbusinessowners.com. Enjoy this week's episode.
Last time I felt this nervous was when you challenged me to come up to your house to do the 3 miles, which turned into 8 miles.
No, it was 5.
It was 5.
It was 5. Remember?
5.
Well, no, I asked you right before the new year. I said, what would be a mind-blowing goal for you to accomplish in 2024?
I said 5 miles.
I said, yeah, you kind of stood there for a minute. And you're like, man, if I did 5 miles. And I said, fucking be at my house at, Sunday at like 6 a.m.
And I made a whole lot of different excuses like,
you started stuttering.
Grant.
He started stuttering. It's my schedule. I can't, or something. I said, nobody fucking has shit going on Sunday, dude. Get your ass up there. I said, no judgment. And you said, no judgment. And I said, I promise, bro. And I said, I'll walk that bitch with you if we got to.
I did have stuff on Sunday, but that was in the evening, and I was...
You were making excuses.
Yeah. No one had anything going on at like 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I was just making excuses trying to get out of it, yeah.
Yeah, you were. So, that was December of 2023, right? So, let's talk about, what's transpired over the last... it's been... 13 months now since you came out to my house, and
13
I lied
months.
to you and told you that it was only 5 and it was really 8. Every about mile and a quarter, I was like, hey, you're a mile. And then at like mile 5 or 6, I'm like, bro, you've already done it. We just got a couple more miles to get back to my house. And so what did that experience, I guess, do for your brain? Because the brain 3 or 4 days earlier was saying, dude, that's impossible. There's no way I can do that. That's a massive goal. And then you came out and we did 8 miles.
It definitely told me that I was a lot more capable than I thought I was. In the past, I've only ever, up until that point, I'd only ever run like a mile at a time. And that was because high school PE class made me run miles. And I always found that experience absolutely terrible. So I thought, there's no way I can do, because at the end of every one, I was practically like dying, heaving, begging for breath.
Yeah.
So I'm like, there's no way I can do more than a mile. But I want to, I figured if I ran enough, I could get there. But I'm like, I just don't want to do it. And you're like, well, we'll do 5. And I'm like, you're gonna be dragging me the whole way, dude. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And it was December, so it was late December when we did it. So it was cold.
It was very cold.
Yeah, it was very cold. It wasn't
borrow your gloves.
Oh yeah, I had to give you my gloves because you were
fixing my hands were freezing.
Yeah, that's true. Dude, that was a great experience. I love torturing people in the sake of them seeing progress.
Yeah.
Right? There's a difference in being like evil and torturing somebody and wanting to see somebody go through pain. And then there's the other side of it where I want to see somebody go through pain because I know how much progress that they could make on the other side of it, right? I know that, if we can expand your comprehension of what's possible by putting you in a situation of being able to do something that you thought was impossible, what happens to the mind is it says, okay, what else could I do that I didn't think was possible? Because obviously I thought that was much bigger of a deal than it really was. Would you say that's accurate?
Oh, no, absolutely. Because when you took me out there and you secretly tricked me into going into 8, up until that point, what I've been doing around lunchtime was you told me to go walk for 30 minutes. I've been walking for 30 minutes every single day. But after I walked those 8 miles, I realized, okay, so if I can do that, and then I could probably just like run on the regular. So when I continued doing the walking out there, I started just like slowly doing like going faster and faster with my walks until I started doing brisk jogs at places. And then the next thing I knew, I was just going out every single day to full on do runs.
Why do you think I told you that you need to go out at lunch to go get a couple mile walk in? Why do you think that was important to me to see you do that?
Because I wasn't really doing it. I was stuck in the office all day. I wasn't even really getting up from my desk doing anything. I was glued to the computer.
And at home, you're a writer, right? So you get lost in your thoughts, right? You're sometimes up until 1 or 2 in the morning, just, brain dumping stuff in your books, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're at the office in front of a computer. Yeah. Then you go home into your room, and then you're brain dumping, the thoughts that you have in your brain into the books that you write at home, right? And so it's like, for me, anybody that's in my ecosystem, I guess, or if you work for me, I want to see you win, not just financially. I want to make sure that you're okay mentally and okay physically. I know somebody can't be in a good mental state if they're not in a good physical state, right? You can't be lethargic physically, but then be amazing mentally, So what would you say the change has been for you in terms of maybe your mental state, how you feel about yourself, things like that, from you in 2024 versus now, after eventually getting to the point where we did the 8 miles, you were doing your lunch walks that turned into running every single day, and now you run a minimum of 3 miles every single morning. What changes have you noticed in yourself as a human being doing that stuff?
I mean, the most obvious is like the physical stuff. That goes without saying. Running does help.
Like, helped you lose weight?
It helps lose weight. It helps breathing a lot, because the heavier you are, the harder it is for you to breathe.
Yeah.
That also, just being out there running also helps mentally, because you feel like you're accomplishing something. Finishing the run, it releases the adrenaline, all the good, happy chemicals into your body, and you actually feel good about doing something instead of just sitting around,
sitting idle.
I mean, like a TV show will make you like feel like happy if you watch it, but like in between that, you'll just be sitting there like, I just wasted like an hour watching something, and it doesn't really, nothing has really changed in my life.
So as you guys know, Nick and me go get a sandwich every once in a while. If you follow us on social media, the Real Business Owners account, Nicky is my sandwich bro.
The sandwich connoisseur.
The sandwich connoisseur. The sandwiches makes his palates dance. Let me ask you this. Have I embarrassed you a few times while we were out there getting sandwiches?
In the beginning, yeah, because like every time you do this, every time we go up to a sandwich place and we're ordering, and you say, "Oh, by the way, we're professional sandwich
tasters." Like, yeah.
And in the beginning, that really
you would turn bright red.
Yeah.
And now
I'm used to it now. I'm used to it now. But like in the beginning, I'm like, no, we're not professional. We're just doing this for shits and giggles.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know where it leads, right?
You never know.
Your walking turned to running. So what's changed since being embarrassed initially versus now? Like, do you feel like that you're a little bit more lighthearted and care a little bit less about what people think based upon your confidence level increasing?
I'm usually always lighthearted, but like definitely the less caring about like how people perceive me.
Yeah.
Because that was, and still kind of is still a big problem with me, is just, I care a lot about how people see me, and I try to rise up to what standards I think they want me to be at.
Yeah. Is that why sometimes when I get frustrated, it's a little, it's hurtful or painful to you?
Yeah, because it's on one part, I recognize my pitfalls and realize I should have been better than that. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, it's also like oh man, he expected this from me and I couldn't deliver. That hurts, because I like pushing myself to be better, but at the same time, I also want to be the thing that people want me to be in that moment.
Yeah, and I think part of that is because you don't want to let other people down.
I hate letting people down.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
And we've had several tough conversations. When I have a tough conversation with you, what is your brain saying when I'm sitting there having a discussion with you. Can you see the side of it where it's important for a business owner to have a tough conversation with their people sometimes?
Oh, absolutely.
So what's ended up happening after we've had a tough conversation?
After we have a tough conversation, usually the day after, or if not a couple hours later, I'll turn back to the assignment at hand and I'll reevaluate and try to figure out what we can do to make things better. Like that one time back in December where we were talking and what
was that about?
My turnaround times and my deliverings on projects was absolutely abysmal. I was like,
I mean, you don't got to say it like that.
I mean,
it
was.
What the conversation was is that there's some complacency settling in.
Yeah.
And you know it, and I know it. And I'm not a good leader if I'm allowing it to happen. So I'm just as guilty as you are allowing some form of complacency within the organization. And I'm not doing you any favors as a human being to allow you to become complacent because you're not living up to your potential. It always feels better when somebody kind of holds a mirror up to you and says, look, man, look at you. Look at how you're performing. And you could look at it and say, you know what? You're right. I'm going to do better. Because when you do better, how do you feel about yourself?
I personally felt like a little bit of pride about like, hey, I woke up, I saw the problems that were going on and I strove to fix it. And I've set up something that will fix all the problems that we've been encountering.
If we didn't have that tough conversation, we wouldn't have what right now?
We wouldn't have Monday.com. We wouldn't have an elaborate process where I can get you at least a reel every single day. You can log on every day and you'll see, oh, I can post this today because it's there waiting for you. You don't have to pester me asking, hey, have you done anything yet?
Yeah. So there's now a system and a process, and it's organized where we have 4 different things a day that we could post if that's what we want to post, right? We've got the Twitter style.
We got Twitter style. We got the regular image quotes. We got some of the billboard stuff that we've been working on.
And then we have the reels.
We got reels that between me and Austin, we're going to have a surplus of reels coming in real soon, I feel.
So tough conversations end usually in what manner?
Well, they start off better, but they usually end with a sign of growth.
A sign of growth.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. Do you feel, though, that I do a good job of also taking accountability where we're weak, right? Even though I'm addressing it with you, it's more so having a conversation about the area in which the organization is weak. Yes, you might be overseeing it, but do you feel like I take accountability as well, being like the other day, right? We were sitting there, we were going through something and I just yelled, fuck. What was going through your mind that time?
I'm like, oh, this is the loudest he's ever spoken in my vicinity. Oh, I fucked up big time.
So you were scared and you were a little nervous.
I was scared. I was nervous. I was like, because literally, like the only ever time I've ever heard you sound that loud is when you're trying to get a message through to the audience on podcasts.
Yeah.
So I've never heard you sound that angry before because you're always very chill.
You've heard me on some phone calls with some people.
Well, some who are like very rare. And those are like people that push
that owe me money or,
So to hear that from you, from me, like that was like, oh, I've stepped beyond where the very few have ever heard.
Before we left that day, I said, just so that you know, bro, that wasn't directed towards.
Yeah. It wasn't directed towards me.
I was frustrated based upon the fact that obviously my level of communication hasn't been up to par to where we weren't on the same page about that situation. So sometimes I show my emotions, but it has nothing to do with you because I have to take ownership as a leader, right? You have to take ownership as a man, and so do I, right? And that's how it works. And now if we both come together and have a tough conversation and both take ownership of it, then we get to let the water go under the bridge and we move on and we end up in a better place because of it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. The couple of conversations we've had where we need to reevaluate and fix, not once have you ever put all the blame on me.
Okay.
Like,
why do you think that's important for a business owner to do?
On one hand, like for the business owner, you are responsible for your employees. You're responsible for making sure that their work life is good and that they are doing their job.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you can't always just like put everything to blame on them. Sometimes employees do things and it's 100% their fault. But other times there's other factors, and there's just sometimes the system just doesn't compromise in the way you want it to, and it affects work. So it's always great to take responsibility in some ways. You don't have to like say, hey, this is 100% my fault, but it always helps every once in a while towards the employees. It's like, hey, so like you're screwing up in this place, but at the same time, this is also partly my fault for this. Mutual accountability is a lot more better than just pointing the fingers at employees and saying like, this is your fault, because that makes the employee feel like, at least the normal ones, not the irresponsible ones, it makes them feel really bad. Because the normal ones out there who show up every day and want to get the bread and want to see this company grow, put a lot of effort into it. It stings a lot when everything like gets put on them.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. The reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast is because it's easy for me to get on a microphone and say, hey, do this, have tough conversations with your people, but nobody ever gets to see the other side of it, where you get to see somebody that I've had a tough conversation with on the microphone telling you how important it is as an employee to, one, be held accountable so that they're reaching their full potential. Do you feel like you've grown a lot because of maybe some of the friction that we've had to experience?
Absolutely. I feel like I have grown. I'm definitely not the same person you met when I first walked in your doors like 3 years ago.
Do you remember that first time you had to record your first podcast by yourself?
Yeah, my
you were almost crying.
Yeah, because the manager who was in charge of training me hadn't finished training me and quit without notice the day prior.
Yeah.
I walked in not completely unaware that she had quit, and I sat down. I had gotten the room ready because I knew how to set up cameras and lights, and I was waiting for her to come in and teach me how to do like the soundboard and everything. And then you guys come in and you're like, hey, by the way, so-and-so quit that day. And I'm like, what? And it was just like a real oh shit moment, because I went from like paddling in the shallows to being like sucked into the deep end.
And I think the conversation was, hey bro, let's do it. Don't stress it. If it works, then great. If it doesn't, then it doesn't. To try to help calm your nerves just a little bit. So there's just, from that moment to where you are now, did you set all this up? And then now you're sitting down and being the one talking, to where you're that comfortable. Right. And so I just want to highlight the fact that, one, I had a podcast that dropped, I think it's called Tough Conversations, right? And it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And some of those things that were talked about on the podcast was about the tough conversation that Nick brought up in December. And I will say that if we didn't have that tough conversation, we wouldn't have the system or the process, or it wouldn't be as organized as things is today, because I like, when I'm trying to communicate to somebody, allow them to feel the sting a little bit. I want it to hurt a little bit, because that friction helps create progress, right?
Right.
But also I want to circle back and let the individual know how much potential that I see in them. Why would I sit down and spend my time having a conversation with you about making something better if I didn't know that you could make something better? Because then it would just be a waste of time.
Yeah.
At that point, I would say, okay, well, we got to let go of Nick and find somebody else who could do it, because I would just be breathing hot air just to breathe hot air towards you, knowing that nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
The only time an employer usually spends time trying to pour into somebody is when they're like, damn, I know that this person can perform at a much better level, and I see so much potential in them, and I don't know exactly what I got to do to pull it out of them, or her in some cases, but I'm going to do the best I can. And one, make it sting just a little bit to where they reflect and they look inside and they're honest with themselves and say, damn, I could do better. I really can do better.
Yeah.
We've had conversations about pay. Hey, pay raise or whatever. And the conversation goes, if you're not increasing, then why would your pay increase? Right? Which is a tough conversation to have with somebody, because naturally most employees think, hey, if I'm just here for another year doing nothing different, maybe I just get paid more. There's a certain amount of money allotted to be able to do the French fries, right? So if it just because somebody does French fries for 30 years doesn't mean they're making $100,000 a year now doing French fries. So that's just what that position allows. But if you can bring value in other areas and take stress off of an employer, then you start becoming more valuable. Right. And the reason why I say that, and the reason why I wanted to say that, is because I think you've done an amazing job since that conversation. Like, you've absolutely crushed it over the last several months. Not only that, I can't tell you how proud I am of you in terms of me walking in here, seeing the trash taken out without you even being asked. You know, you water the plants around here now without really being asked. The old version of you would do the least amount of, just kind of show up, do his job silently and quietly, fly under the radar. And the new version of you is kind of taking the bull by the horns.
Yeah.
Right. So I've seen this massive shift, and I'm trying to identify exactly what's helped you step into that version of yourself. So as business owners listening to this, maybe there's something that they could do with their employees to help their employees that's kind of flying under the radar, just doing the bare minimum to get by, take the bull by the horns. Or what can they do to help somebody kind of step into that?
Well, for employers, I'd say it followed just pretty closely with what you did. If you have an employee who you feel like can reach the height, like different heights, but just they're not there, they're coasting, they're on autopilot, it doesn't hurt to have a God to honest sit down, face-to-face personal talk with them without any of the, hey, like, I'm your boss, I'm higher up on the,
like, speaking down to you.
Yeah, no speaking down. Just sit down eye to eye as people, as human beings, and addressing the matters. Like, hey, I see that you can do this and this. You have the potential, but you're just not doing it. A firm kick to the ass, so to speak, is always like a good way to get them started, but not in the way where it just like feels like you're being punched down, but more of a like a slap awake. Hey, get up, the school bus is here. You need to get going. You know, like when you were going to school, did your parents just like walk into your room and like just like start punching you in the face, or did they kind of like shake you awake and say, hey, like, you're ignoring your alarm again, you need to get moving? So yeah, just like a sit down, a honest to talk of people talking to each other and just like addressing what's going on, the problems, and trying to see if they have ideas on how they can fix it, because sometimes employees have a decent enough idea of where the leaks and cracks are, but it never gets addressed and they never get a chance to express how they want to address it.
Do you think sometimes employers don't do a good job creating space for an employee to bring suggestions of ways to fix things or ways to make things better?
I think there is definitely a bad pattern in the work culture. I'm not saying everyone does it, and I know like you and a bunch of other entrepreneurs I met are really good like employers, but there's definitely a wider thing out there where criticism, even beneficial and positive criticism, isn't looked on too fondly. And it's like there's always a risk.
So you're talking about the culture is nobody wants to offend people.
No one wants to offend people, and especially in like some people are just, sometimes they feel like they're grateful that they even just have a job and they don't want to risk like,
saying, hey, we could do this better, and risking that maybe.
Yeah, because like sometimes there are very egotistical people out there who get offended by that kind of thing. I have personally never met any, but I know a couple of friends who have personally dealt with that kind of thing.
What, with employers that, that are like, dude, shut up and just do your job?
Yeah, I run this company. I built it from the ground up. I know this company way better than you.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes it pays to like be in the trenches with the employee and seeing what they're experiencing. And that's definitely something that you did. Like that was great, because remember, you sat with me and watched the process of how I edit things and how I edit podcasts. And like, how did that affect how you approach podcasts and like videos we do? Like you started being more mindful. It's like, oh, I fumbled here, but instead of just like trying to push through, I can like wait a couple seconds and I can
start over
and you can just cut out that gap and no
one notices.
Yeah. You're able to see that process and like the time it takes to edit podcasts and all that stuff. You're able to get like a worm's eye view in the trenches of like that type of stuff. And it helped. Like, I think it helped a lot. And just like,
I think so too.
You were able to plan ahead. It's like, okay, we can do this, but I know from firsthand experience that this causes him this much time to work on. So we need to account for that now.
That's a very wise thing that you said. Let me ask you, what's so far in the 3 years, what's the best memory that you have working here
working here.
We've done a lot of shit.
We've done a lot of shit, so that's
Like,
a long list.
Fuck, we've been we've been to what? North Carolina, we've been to Mexico, California, Montana,
Those trips are always fun.
Texas, Florida. Have you been to Florida with us?
I went to Florida with Kale back when we were part of Easier.
Oh, yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, that was definitely a fun first trip.
That was your first trip?
That was my first ever trip. I was
scared as shit.
I was so nervous.
Yeah.
Because like one, I was responsible for all this equipment, and two, no one was like telling me, like they just said, everyone's saying, dude, just film everything. And I'm like, okay, but like, how do you want that film? What does that look like? Don't worry about it, dude. Just film everything.
Not the best communication, but
I mean, it was coming off.
Film it
was coming off, I think, of a growing problem where the person before me just didn't pick up the camera ever.
Yeah.
So it was like, please, for the love of God, you're brand new. There's still time to instill this. Be different.
So you gave advice to a business owner. What advice could you give to an employee of a business owner? Because you said, hey, be open to critique or, work closely with the individual, maybe get on the front lines, see some gaps. As difficult that it is, I mean, you see some of the stuff that I deal with and that I go through, right?
Yeah.
The struggle for business owners is real, right?
It is very real.
So what advice do you have for employees that are working for somebody that's going through the struggle of trying to build something?
Make sure you show up and make sure you do what you set out to do. Don't just show up just to be there. Don't show up to be present. You're not being paid to sit in an office all day. You're not being paid just to show up to work. You're being paid to do tasks to help the company. And it doesn't hurt every once in a while to do a little bit more. And it doesn't hurt to sometimes approach.
Why is it important to do a little bit more maybe than what you're getting paid for right now?
Well, it's like, I'll equate this to running because it's the best metaphor I can think of in the moment. When you're running, some days you go faster, some days you go slower. And sometimes when you're doing long treks, like when you do your 13 miles every day, you're not running the whole 13 miles, right? Sometimes you slow down a bit. Sometimes you walk for like 30 seconds and stuff. Some days you show up and you're going your usual pace. And other days you should push yourself a little bit. Otherwise, you're just going to stay stagnant. And it's like, if I never had taken up that type of advice, I would still be outside walking for 30 minutes. Never bothering to start jogging, going a little faster. I would not be a runner now. I would just still be outside walking because that's my comfortable pace. I like walking. Anything past that is uncomfortable for me.
Why do you think that that's important for a human to do, even outside of pay? Do you think it does something for them in terms of self-worth and pride and being proud of themselves by going above and beyond?
You can't make any progress if you don't push yourself even a little bit, whether it be in the gym, whether it be with your friends, or deciding to go talk to that cute girl that
which Nikki's been doing lately.
I've been doing that. But just like every human being has their little perfect box that they like being in, inside the box. That's comfort, right?
Comfort zone, yeah.
Comfort zone. Everyone has their own comfort zone. And to everyone past that comfort zone is nothing but uncomfortableness, uncertainty, and pain. And it's something that I think adults frequently forget. As kids, our comfort zone is always growing, mostly because we never really had a say in the matter when our parents decided to take us somewhere. So we're always experiencing these new things, these new sensations. We're always expanding and growing when we're children. But once we become adults, we kind of almost settle into this schedule.
Yeah.
And that's all well and good. People need schedules so that way there's order in their lives. But it doesn't hurt to continue to push yourself, to try new things, to do things that you know are uncomfortable so that way you can get comfortable with it. For example, sometimes people are really terrible at making food. They hate cooking. They hate being in the kitchen cooking. It makes them feel uncomfortable. But on the other hand, if they push themselves a little bit more, maybe they could discover a new passion by learning how to cook a specific dish. Humans need to continue to push themselves. The human race itself has gone to where it is right now because we push ourselves. We're always innovating. We're always pushing forward. We're always looking for new ways to be better.
So it's important for business owners to do that, and it's important for employees to do that. So in other words, it's important for human beings in general to evolve as self, right? As a being, to expand. And if they don't expand, they become stagnant. And becoming stagnant means what?
They don't grow. They become stale. And what happens is usually at that point,
Depressed.
the rhythm over and over and over again bores into your brain, and your brain just becomes accustomed to it and becomes bored. It becomes used to it. There's nothing exciting or thrilling for it anymore. And that's one of the different ways where you can sink into depression. It also circles around to the original point. It's all well and
It's
good.
important to push yourself even at the office.
It's all well and good for employees to push themselves, and you're always encouraging employers and entrepreneurs to push themselves because that's how you become successful. But at the same time, it's also important to make sure that your employees are pushing themselves. Sometimes employees can't see the opportunities given to them, and sometimes you need to illuminate the path or give them a shove out the front door and get them running. Sometimes they just can't see it. Sometimes they're willfully ignoring it, and sometimes they don't want to.
Yeah.
The last ones are the problem ones that usually end up
Just don't care.
quitting anyways. But
Yeah.
the other two, you just kind of need to sometimes show them the path sometimes. And
Do you think that there's young people your age that appreciate that? A lot of employers, they just kind of step lightly because they don't want to lose somebody, right? Because it's hard to then end up hiring somebody and they got to train them and replace them and so everybody's like kind of just getting complacent, right? And therefore the individual, the employee isn't progressing, and neither is the employer as a leader or as a business, because there's this conversation that needs to be had that both parties aren't having, and then complacency sets in and you don't really feel fulfilled in your workplace if somebody's not forcing you to expand, right?
I like to call it like the loop of fear almost, because like you said, the employer is like
Fearful
of stepping on eggshells. But at the same time, you got the employee on the other hand who wants to, sometimes they want to do push forward to impress, or sometimes they just want to stay the course because they don't want to risk getting fired. And so they're scared there. And the fear both kind of feed into each other and just cause neither side to want to act.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but it's definitely a thing.
In the discomfort that you've experienced over the years working here, I've seen a lot of growth. That's the whole theme of the conversation.
Yes.
One, I create a discomfort in terms of making him squirm a little bit in front of people, making his face turn red, get flushed, embarrassed. And there's a reason for that, right? The reason is because I want you to continue to get more and more confident and comfortable in your own skin and just have fun with it. Two, pushing you to say, hey, go outside and go for a walk for 30 minutes every day at lunch. Just go do that, right? As a part of you working here, it was go get your miles in, go walk 2 miles. Why? Because I think it's important to get uncomfortable there in a physical manner as well. Then the uncomfortable conversations that we've had to have that also created progress internally as an organization. Every situation that I just went through, I've seen you evolve through that discomfort. So the theme here, and you guys already know the podcast, I talk about it a lot. I wanted to have you guys see a different side of it. I wanted you guys to see a side of it where Nick works here and he's grown so much through the discomfort that I talk about on the podcast, having tough conversations that I talk about on the podcast, creating systems and processes to actually give him data that he knows, man, I fucking crushed it today because I did this, 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 and this. You have visual proof that you're doing a good job. You don't have to doubt yourself, right? So that's what systems do or processes do. So it's man, this was my assignment. I did this, 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 this. There's the data. There's the proof. All of these things are done. And now I have deliverables. These are things that it's easy to talk about on a microphone. It's a lot more difficult to live up to it, to push your employees physically, to make them get uncomfortable. I'm not telling you to go out there and introduce people as, big dick so-and-so. Definitely I wouldn't do that. Obviously that was after many years of kind of Nick working here. It was in a setting in which I knew it was okay. I'm not going to do that as we're going out to eat sandwiches. Two things. One, I've enjoyed watching you progress. And two, I'm very proud of everything that you've done and the direction that you're headed in. And I'm excited to see you continue to evolve. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it more than you know.
Yeah, thank you for always being the fire lit under my ass, the boss that cares and makes sure that I'm living up to my potential, because there's a lot of bosses out there that just either are too scared or just don't care enough to pay attention to their employees.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much.
What a wonderful episode. I hope you got something from it. If you will, please rate and review this episode. Even if you've reviewed it before or rated it before, please do so again. It definitely helps move up the rankings in terms of Apple Podcasts. And so if you see this on Spotify and you have any comments, there's a comment section, and I like to look at those and I comment back. Much love to you. Keep kicking ass. We'll see you next week.